Okay, so a couple of words for the beginning. Half a year ago, we, Mrs. Sornina and me, were happy to have an interview with you by Zoom, and you told that you were not able to believe that in half a year you come to Moscow with a whole ensemble to play Happen by Pierre Boulez. But we also could not believe that, but it is going to happen tomorrow, so welcome to Moscow. You also said that day that it would be nice to meet some of your Moscow colleagues. So here we have some music journalists, some young musicologists and some composers. So we have quite an unofficial kind of meeting. If you have some questions, you can begin, or some of our guests can begin as well.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for coming. We initially planned to have, even share a meal and go to the restaurant, but then I realized that it's still COVID time, and I thought it's a little safer to keep a little distance. So thank you so much for coming and meeting us, and I have to start with a confession. I cannot believe that never in my life before, and I just turned 50 years old, I've been to Moscow. It is my first time in Moscow. And I've been to St. Petersburg before, twice, and worked with Marinsky, but I've never been to Moscow. So I wish it would not be COVID and everything would feel a little more natural in terms of, touristic things and more time.
We hope so.
More time to feel the city and to feel you and meet you. I have two familiar faces, but I wish it would be many more. So hopefully this is to a start of more visibility in this grand city with a great richness and diversity of cultures. And yes, it is a miracle that we're here. We just came back from 2 weeks in Japan, and that was another miracle that we had a huge residency at Suntory Hall with many, many concerts, and we have been the only orchestra after the Vienna Philharmonic that made it to Japan in 1.5 years. And now we're here in Moscow, and the COVID cases are still raging, and we're playing for you with the work that is most significant for our identity in the history of 43 years of the ensemble.
Yeah.
44,
I believe.
44.
Yeah,
45.
44 years of the ensemble. And
I also have to introduce our.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
guest.
Yes, of course.
Olivier,
Olivier,
the director of the ensemble, also ready to ask all the questions.
So this work is actually the whole program is very significant for who the ensemble is nowadays, and also in the past. What we've been trying in the last 8 years since I'm with the ensemble as artistic director is that we work in the present and feature the music that is written now or has been written in the last 20 years. Then the second leg is looking back at the grand repertoire of even the second Viennese school, Alban Berg and Webern and Schönberg, and the early Ligeti, the early Stockhausen, and the major works of the second half of the 20th century. And the third leg is, of course, the investissement, the investment in the future. So we're constantly exploring and seeing what is happening all over the world, and as hard as it is, because we don't have so many opportunities. We're not playing concerts every week like a symphonic orchestra where you just, this week we play Brahms 2 and 4 and it's this pianist, and we have to really invent projects. So it's not just that we put a program together with composer A and composer B and composer C. We invent a context. We compose programs that also are very much connected to the needs of the presenter. It's not that I want to do this. There's so much that comes with it. I mean, we need to make sure that all our musicians are featured more or less equally. Then every presenter has a certain idea of what we should play, and so it's always an open discussion. And I find this beautiful because it allows us to be very conscious and thoughtful about decision making. But yes, I wish we would have a lot more possible slots, so we could play much more music. And I find it in my responsibility heartbreaking to sadly have to say no so many times to so many amazing pieces that we should and would play, but there is not that much capacity, sadly. And as on the other hand, it's so wonderful to discover someone and all of a sudden be able to feature something. So it's a very complex thing. And what we are bringing here to you this week in Moscow is, as I said and tried to say in the beginning, is very significant for what we do. We have one of the great classics of the beginning of the 20th century, the piece by Varese, Octobre, that you might all know. We've just played it for the first time in Tokyo without a conductor, and it went really well. So I have mixed feelings about it. So we're playing this, and as we have Irkam here too for the Boulez, we wanted to absolutely feature another piece that takes advantage of the art of the electronics that Irkam is featuring. And there's this incredible piece by Yann Robin, Art of Metal, that was written for our bass clarinet player Alain, and it's a wild piece. He plays it on a contrabass clarinet with you feel like you're being in a rock concert. It's wild, and I'm sure it's gonna, if you like it or not, it's gonna make a strong impression on you. It's like it's like a Beethoven symphony or a painting by Picasso. You might like it or not like it, but the fact that something very strong is present is out of question. So this is exactly what it's going to be. It's going to open the concert, then the Varese, and as the organizer, dear Marcus, wanted to have one of my own pieces on the program. I thought there's a recent piece, a trio that features exactly the same orchestration like the famous Debussy trio. It's a flute, harp, and alto, viola, brace. How do you say
Viola?
Viola?
Viola.
Well, viola. So, and I wrote this piece in the darkest COVID times, and I received a phone call from the gentleman that commissioned it, Daniel Barnborn, for his friends in Berlin, and Emmanuel Pahu. He called me on the same day, and I sat down and started writing the piece in 4 days. And that's the one thing, and I wanted to hear how you composers have somehow. No, let's say, how has the crisis impacted your creativity? I think that most of the composers that I've talked to, and all my composer friends, have produced significantly. I mean, very few only had a complete blockage. Others took advantage of being confined at home and expressed their frustration, their agony, their privilege of being able to create even in the darkest circumstances, and wrote so much music. And it was the same with me, because there was no more conducting, there was no traveling, there was no nothing. It was just, walking the dog and cooking 2 fancy meals every day and writing music in between. And it was wonderful. It was tough, but it was also wonderful to recognize, especially where I am in my life, that, wow, yes, I'm still a composer, and it brings you so much joy to create because you're completely free. And I still, during the whole time, taught my students at the Juilliard School virtually. And every time they were hesitating or collapsing, and I told them, listen, this is really the moment where you can completely strip off all the weird expectations from an external world, like, oh, maybe I should write this so I get a chance to win that competition, or maybe I write that way or for that orchestration so I might have a chance to be played. I said, do what you really feel and what you need to do artistically. And if you want to write a piece for 3 harpsichords and 2 recorders and a tuba, This is the moment, if you feel that, that's what you really need to do to make a strong artistic statement. And then my students wrote crazy pieces that have not yet been played to some extent, but there is so much blood and sweat in it, and it's so much them, and I'm very proud to see what we're actually able to do if we're really not dependent on external circumstances. So this is, for me, this like COVID time that allowed me to really get closer to myself and unlock some sort of directness and even simplicity that I didn't have access to, because it was for me. It was my ritual to find a reason to get up in the morning and create and not immerse yourself in the depression and the misery. So creation was an incredibly powerful tool, and I don't know how you guys were living and are still living with the virus, but maybe I can open the discussion and hear how you guys were dealing with it here in Russia, if you want to. Anyone? It's I would also love to find out how the whole commissioning situation here is, and if there's any sort of visible, significant government support to really encourage sonic contemporary creation, or if it's more ghettoized. And maybe do you feel now, coming out of the crisis, that the new music is even further pushed away because people want to play safe and stick to the grand repertoire and not dare to present music because it doesn't sell as many tickets? Or, I mean, I really know nothing about the new music scene in let's say in Moscow, not in Russia, in Moscow. Where are you with this today? And is it different from what it was like maybe 2 or 3 years ago?
There's a lot to say, but I believe some of our guests would like to answer.
Maybe for the beginning I could say that not all composers who want to be here are here today, because these days an academy for the youth composers are going in Чайковский city, and as I know, Коля, ты только что оттуда, да, Николай, just come back from there, and as I know, Marc André in Tchaikovsky now, he is teaching there, so...
He's here?
Yes, yeah, no, not here, in
most of
Tchaikovsky
us.
city, not да, он приехал. So, some composers all over from Europe are teaching now in small Russian city, in young composers.
Yes, first of all, thank you very much for this meeting. I'm very glad to see you here. I have heard many times live, and of course the recordings on the YouTube are just like everyday music material for me as a composer and teacher. I showed these recordings, and I wanted also to say that in 2009 I heard Intercontemporain in Paris with Aventures from Ligeti, to both of them, and it was one of maybe best musical experience in my life until now. So I'm very happy and looking forward to listen to you tomorrow. Yes, so to answer to your question, Matthias, so until now I think there was no really regular possibilities for composers to receive any funding from governmental or any private fundings for commissioning, and it was always very particular situations with particular people and particular opportunities, nothing regular. But this year, I guess it was the first time when, after Soviet period, when the Union of Composers has received or has organized this opportunity to to make commissions to Russian composers. So now we hope that it will be regularly open. Also for international ensembles and musicians who want to commission Russian composers. But there are some good possibilities for composers to work in interdisciplinary fields. For example, in theater, and it pays pretty well to work for theater. And the theater culture in Russia, well, in particular in Moscow and St. Petersburg, it's very high and rich. So for me personally, it has been a very enriching experience to start working, writing music for theater plays. In fact, I will have to leave now because I have to announce open doors for a new course for music for theater in the university. And I hope that there will be some new students who want to attend it. For your question, yes, now there is and there will be some possibilities.
And independent from the question of like receiving paid commissions, but would like all the major orchestras that you have in the country, would they commit even beyond the question of if it's a paid commission, but is your music being heard, or is it just pushed into new music festivals, or is it more that then maybe the conductor says, oh, this is my composer friend and I would love to feature the work, or is it in the heads of the institution that they feel?
No, I think the first parent.
It's more the personal connections in between people that support each other than that the institution says we have to play a certain amount of, like what in Scandinavia it's the case, or even now in Holland, that basically every single symphonic program has to have some sort of a contemporary work or a Dutch work, or Scandinavia, like all in, these people all being published and played, and there's lots of funding for them to have every piece recorded if it's a certain quality, of course.
No,
actually,
not yet.
Not yet, huh?
Of course, we also have these possibilities. Not always with orchestras, of course, but for example, with ensembles and. Of course, Vladimir Tarnopolsky's new music ensemble, which has played premieres of I don't know how many new works, maybe
many.
More than 1,000.
Many.
I don't know.
Yeah.
And Moscow Contemporary Music Ensemble and GAM Ensemble. So we have some movements,
There's
of course, in that
yeah.
scene. And there is also an annual festival of the Union of Composers, which also has once in a while symphonic concerts and also features, of course, new music, because that's why they're there. So yes, it happens once in a while with orchestras as well. Well, with ensembles, it's regularly happening.
Good. Yeah. We have in Paris, I think we're so lucky to have our own concert hall. So we always rehearse at home in even mostly the hall that we've been performing in, which is a wonderful privilege, because usually, even with orchestra, sometimes they have to work in studio spaces, and then they maybe only can go into the hall for the dress rehearsal. And it's so important for guaranteeing a really consistent quality, that the identity is also being shaped by working in good acoustic conditions, because that's what we're trained to do. And so we're very, very lucky. And then I think Arnaud Merlin can confirm this. The ensemble is also very lucky with having some sort of, maybe Olivier wants to say something about that. We have a fairly unconditional support by our audience. They come and want to hear the ensemble. So it's a little less that someone comes and picks that concert because that has the piece of Ligeti or Lachenmann. They come because they like to hear us play. And I hope I'm not exaggerating, but maybe it's interesting to hear Arnaud's and Olivier's opinion, but I feel, and from all the people, audience people that talk to me, is that it's like you're a restaurant that you like to go to because you like how they cook. You don't go and check what is the plat du jour or what is the special dish of the day, and that triggers your decision to go. No, you go because you like how they cook. You like their style.
I wanted to propose the comparison of a restaurant because that's exactly that. We are known as a good restaurant. And people come because they know they will have some good dishes to listen to, to eat to. So yes, and that's the same for all the presenters in France or abroad. Yes, we discuss the programs, but they know we will propose some significant pieces and interesting things, new things or old things, and we precise by discussing together. We precise the program for one concert, but they know that it will be good in the end.
And this is also because we are 4 years old, and recently there has been even some of the members that have been with the ensemble since it was founded. So they left because they went à la retraite, retirement. And then we play Repon, and we played Repon in Paris in June. 44th year, June. And there were 7 young players, some of new members of the ensemble and some of guests, because some of our jobs are currently open and not filled. And so we had 7 new people that played for the first time with us this piece, and it's so powerful to see. There is a tradition, and these new people are being immersed but also coached very discreetly. Whenever I'm just saying something to the harp, then in the clarinet section, and it's like there is a tradition of how we play it, and it's being from generation to generation being forwarded. And it's the same thing like with the Gewandhaus Orchestra in Leipzig or the Concertgebouw or the Boston Symphony. There is still a tradition of how they sound, how they phrase, how they articulate. And why is that? Because they might, the Vienna oboe is a different oboe from the German oboe, and the Boston Symphony plays in that unique hall, and the acoustics determine the style. And it's the same with us. There is a style of how we play music, and it comes clearly also from the upbringing in the conservatory. There is this sense for the so-called clarté, it's something very French. It's a consciousness of the detail. So, and I love this about, you find it in anything French, in literature, in the visual arts, clearly in music, but also in architecture. And it doesn't matter if it's a building of the 17th century or the 21st century. If you look at a detail of a piece of architecture, you understand from looking at the detail the entity of the whole artistic work. And I find that something very French, the almost obsession of the detail, but it explains the aura and the spirit of the whole piece, the whole work.
My name is Olga. Nice to meet you.
Hi, Olga.
So there are a lot of composers, but I'm singer and conductor, and for me, in fact, I have a lot of questions, but I understand that I can ask you just one.
You can ask 2.
Yeah, okay. So I want to ask you about your conductor work. So you said about that you composed the program, and for me it's really interesting. Who composes this program? That's not just you, right? There are a lot of people. How much? How you make this decision? How you compose these programs? How long do you prepare the new piece by yourself and with your orchestra. And it's really interesting for me, but if you don't say it's okay, I don't know how it's asked in English, but I will hope you help me. В общем, я хочу спросить о том, что как бы устроен оркестр в том смысле, что есть люди, которые получают зарплату, да, но также помимо этого там очень много камерных программ, где, то есть программы, где большой состав оркестра, а есть только несколько, да, камерных программ. И мне просто интересно, как это работает, как люди, то есть есть какой-то состав, который там всегда основной, а они приглашают, кто это, не знаю, просто слово зарплата по-английски.
Salary.
Пока что. Да я и по-русски плохо знаю. Да. No.
So you began to answer, and then I translate the last question.
Okay, I'll do 1 and 2 first.
Yes.
It's always so different how a program comes together. For example, even at home in Paris, where we are in residence at the Philharmonie de Paris, all our programs have to be in dialogue and approved by the artistic director of the Philharmonie de Paris, because they have certain themes and certain necessities of something that needs to happen or can't happen. So it's not that they're really vetoing something, but it's an open dialogue about what makes sense in which slot. But that's at home. Usually when we talk to a presenter like the Philharmonie of Moscow, this one was a very generous invitation, because we instantly, after the success of last November when we were here, we thought, okay, we should come with a big piece. And clearly, knowing that Répond has not been given here, we thought, well, I think it's time, after a long time, to bring this absolute masterwork to Moscow. And then it was obviously clear. And as I described, I wanted to bring 3 other composers, including myself, that have been recently or for a long time of significance for our identity. Sometimes we just get an invitation and someone says, we invite you to play in Stockholm or Rome or wherever, and can you please play Fausto Romitelli? And then we can say yes or no. So, but it's always different. It's always a dialogue. In some festival, if we play in Donaueschingen, we can only play new pieces. We cannot bring a piece that we have already played. It has to be world premieres, and they have a obviously clear saying in what they would like to have from us. Of course, we say, sure, yes, maybe, okay, or no. That happens too. So it's always a dialogue, and the musicians are very involved in this. And what we are trying to do, we are trying to feature all the musicians somehow in a season as soloists. That means we do program also chamber music. When we program one program, it's not only conducted pieces, there's mostly one piece that is chamber music, so it really features the soloists as soloists, because it is an ensemble of 31 soloists. It's not an orchestra. They are soloists that have decided to play together. So this is how program making comes to terms. And we have obviously composers that we follow and feature for a long time, people that have joined the family, and yes, they have some sort of visibility basically every season, because they have become part of our identity. Like Jan Robin, like, for example, Olga Neuwirth, for the reason that I think she's one of the grandest composers alive, and many people think that. And she's also a wonderful friend, and she knows us. She is, it's like Richard Strauss wrote all his operas for Dresden. It creates a continuity, and we know her music. I think it's a wonderful thing to not constantly do something here, then here, then here. No, we grow together, and we feel confident and have full trust. So that's programming. Then the second question was with new scores, how I learn and study.
Can I add? So you said about that there are a lot of soloists, and for me it's interesting because a lot of pieces, like Lachenmann, for example, they're so difficult. Do you work with whole ensemble, or it's okay to make a rehearsal with just a few musicians?
We never do that. No. So like sectionals or something where you only have the harp and the piano or the percussion. No, we never do that. It's always tutti, because, and I have to say it's a mystery to me how our musicians are actually capable of doing this. I mean, there's a lot of, in America you would say, and it's a casual expression, it's not negative, there's some crazy shit that they're doing. And sometimes I see it when we're traveling together, I see our pianist on an iPad just like, that's how they study a score. They don't even sit at the piano. They're monsters. It's crazy. And sometimes when we, especially in COVID times, we had to change a program because of all these reasons. And it's like, okay, next week we do this. And then take a deep breath. And then I see him next week and it's all there. So
and it happens, some composers are a bit late, not
yes.
often, but sometimes, and the musicians have the score on the very day of the first rehearsal, and they play tutti right now perfectly from the very first rehearsal.
It's an incredible, I think, also talent, because they have no fear. Yeah, it's not like, oh, this is difficult, and like they just, roll up their sleeves and look at it. And of course, I mean, if it's not quality, there is resistance and it's difficult, but it can be as hard as it comes. If it's quality, they will instantly work it out. And for me personally, with all these hundreds and hundreds, probably thousands of scores that I've created, like given birth to in the last 20 years, it's a very different thing if I learn a new piece than if I learn a new Mahler symphony for the first time in my life, because it takes years to always go back to it, and I don't do that, next week I'm conducting Mahler 7, so it's time to learn the score. No, I've started living with the score 4 years before. With new music, you can give me a score 2 days before the first rehearsal, and depending on how big or long it is, I usually spend 1 day with the score. But also, it's like a scan. I just scan it and I have it, but once I played it, it's also gone. So I forget a lot about the pieces, and I can bring it back, but it doesn't stay with you. And obviously, a Mahler symphony becomes a part, and it has nothing to do with evaluation. I'm not saying that all the new music is not the quality or has the importance. It's just I do so much of it that it comes and goes, but I can always bring it back. But I do it very, very quick, and I learned that, I think, from my two teachers, Boulez and Peter Edwisch, who are extremely quick. We have a very good system of marking, which is very efficient. So by marking, I learn it. I don't mark it first and then learn it. The marking is already that. It really is a scan. Zzz, it goes to the score. And then the musicians, now after 8 years together, we have so much trust for each other that we also develop the piece while we rehearse it. Of course, I have a more or less clear idea of what I need to do with it because I see it in the score. I'm an avocat, an advocate for the score. So I'm not like, trombones play that louder because I like it. I think that's stupid. I would never do that with a Beethoven symphony either. It's like I try to find a reference in the score why the trombone should play softer or louder, and that's what I do. And with the ensemble now there is this relationship that we can really explore. We rehearsed today Repond, and of course they say, Matthias, listen here, this is a little fast, and maybe here, it's give and take, and it's not maestro and the musicians on the other side. We are really one team, and that's a wonderful basis for exploring. And when we play a new piece, we discover together. Of course, I'm leading, but I can also take a detour and log out and let someone else lead, and someone else decides the tempo because it's so different. It's give and take. And so my process of learning those scores is very, let's call it efficient. Yeah, efficient. And the third question?
Question from Olga, maybe it's more to Olivier.
Yeah.
It was about the salary of musicians, because you have an ensemble of 31 musicians, but certainly not all of them are busy in all the programs you play a month. So do all of them get the equal salary if they participate in the program or not?
Yes, it's, let's say, an average on the year. They have the same salary each month, depending on for the solo parts they have a bonus, but sometimes they have much to do in a month and they have a normal salary, and sometimes they have quite nothing and they have the same salary. So in the average, on the whole year, it's fair, I'd say. And they have bonus for solo parts like concerto and for chamber music, because they are more exposed. They are supposed to have more work to prepare the scores, and that's fair also.
But yes, we're very lucky. We have a salary basically like an orchestra musician. Though we don't want to be an orchestra, but our system is a little bit operating like a symphonic orchestra. We have health insurance and we're very protected, and we're part of the union and all these things. So we have really very organized work traditions, and as I explained, so we play in our concert hall, and these are absolutely, we know that, very luxurious conditions that allow us to actually deliver the quality. And that's also why the musicians, they're very demanding from the composers and the guest conductors. So you have to, it's like the Berlin Philharmonic of the ensemble world. You come in at a very high level. Everyone is 100% prepared. So there's not like, oh, we still have all week and it's Monday and I'll practice more till Friday. Monday morning, everyone is 100% there. And this is something I very cherish and honor. So my respect for them is tremendous. And with other guest conductors and composers that write for us, if that respect for the work that they're willing to put in is there, it's matched, then you can do anything. You can be very demanding as a composer what you want from them, but it needs to meet the criteria of quality and knowledge of the craft. If you want something from them that is not doable or stupid, then we have a problem. They could go as far as you want, but it needs to be doable. If it's doable, they'll work and work and work until they have it. If it's not doable, there's a discrepancy, and it's a problem.
Do you understand right that government supposed your ensemble, right?
Yeah, we have a lot of government support. More than
Two-thirds of our budget is come from the government.
Okay, that's great. May I ask you one more question? Could it be this situation that your musicians don't want to play any piece or make any sound? They say, oh, no, that's shit, and we don't want to do it. And what do you do? Okay, I understand.
So can it happen or not?
I think we do it. We perform it. They perform it, but we won't reprogram it again. But don't you say with?
It's like with friendships. You know, it could be hot at some point, and maybe after 10 years or 2 years or 2 months, it's a different thing, and it's okay. Because if we give commissions, we don't know what we get. We might have an idea because maybe we follow the composer for years or for 20 years or 30 years, so we know more or less what it's going to be, but you never know. But that's also exciting. You know, you trust someone and you create together. Creating together is wonderful. And if the piece is not as great as another piece of the composer, we might not be as enthusiastic to program it again, except then all of a sudden there's the presenter, oh, you just played that piece and we want to have it in our festival. And then I say, we didn't love it that much, but of course we're going to play it again. I mean, there is no arrogance with the musicians, and I think nowadays, because the diversity of styles, what we play has really been broadened. I think it was more, I wouldn't say narrow, but it was more narrow, I'd say. And now, because we really wanted to show the best of all kinds of music that is being written all over the world. And I know it's a hard job, and I know that we haven't played a lot of Russian music, and there is clearly things that are missing. But I'm really trying to work very hard in this responsibility to get to know as much as I can in my capacity, and then pick the best of completely different styles and aesthetics. And that's new to the ensemble. I mean, yes, we have recently played Steve Reich, and this is not that's not our bread and butter. And they play it really well because they have the standard. And if you don't like the music or like the music, it is still a strong artistic statement. And of course we play Steve Reich because it's a strong voice in the music of today, and it's not, you know, the result of like if I like it or don't like it. We have to play it because it is part of the diversity of what is being offered today. So it's a wonderful thing, but as I told you, it's very, very hard for me to have to say no to so many compositions that are out there. And we have these, you know, people send us scores, we look at all of them, and I wish I could play all of the scores that we think are fantastic. There has never been written more incredible music than nowadays. I think I can say that. And I'm teaching, I follow the young scene, I'm giving master classes, workshops. I know what's going on, and it's tremendous, the quality, and even of the youngest generation, because with the players it's the same thing. If you listen to a 23 years old player in an orchestra, it's incredible what they have to offer at this young age. And they play a Bach solo suite at the same level of insight and commitment than a piece by Ligeti or Lachenmann, and that hasn't been like that 50 years ago. You either played Baroque music, period music, or you played symphonic music, or you were the specialist for new music. Now the youngest generation, they come in with a very open mind, and that is new, and that's the future. You know, try to find your best, your voice in anything, really, that is good. And this is also really happening to the ensemble, that this vision has been clearly broadened and widened, for sure.
Thank you so much. I want to say that I have to go, but before that, I want to ask you one more question. Do you have any program for young conductors and talented conductors like me?
We always have assistant conductors that we employ for 1 or 2 seasons, and now recently, a few years, we started to have 2, because I think it's a lot more fun to have 2 personalities that are working with the ensemble. So we, in 2 weeks, we have an audition for the next assistant conductors, and we are aiming again for picking two new people, and they get to obviously, you know, be with us and conduct. I think it's very important that they don't only sit in rehearsals and help us for the balance and everything that needs to be checked, but they need to conduct and work with the ensemble. And the wonderful thing is, I'm very proud to say that now in the 8 years that I'm with the ensemble, there is former assistant conductors that have launched a wonderful career, and they started with us, and then they did something here, and then they come back to us. So we even have quite many conductors that have been assistant conductors like 6-7 years ago, and now they come back as conductors and conduct, like Julien Leroy, for example. We have many people that are coming back.
And the previous concert in Moscow was conducted by Dylan Corley, who used to be an assistant
4 years ago.
Yes, 4 or 6 years ago.
I will write him.
So I think this is also important to develop a relationship with someone. So it's not only, oh, you get this job for a year and then, no, we want to, if the connection is there in between the so-called assistant conductor and the musicians, it evolves and it merges into a relationship. Everything we do, we're a smaller institution, everything is about relationships, and that's why everything needs to be tuned. And I think we're all very lucky with the incredible trust that we currently share and have. And it's very rare in the business that there is really that trust, because then we can go much further. There's no like, this is what I have to say and that's how it has to be. And no, we just, if there's a problem, we put it on the table in front of us, look at it together and solve it. And that's great. I'm very lucky and I'm very happy to have that connection. And I don't feel like the director. We're all a team. And even not only Oливье, but we have a large team. They're all part of decision making. Our stagehands, they're partners. If they say there's a technical issue and we have to set up this way, then of course we discuss. Yeah, so we're all operating at the same eye level, and I think that's one of the reasons why we can operate successfully and play so well, because we're synced. Yeah, there's no internal, which we sometimes have with symphony orchestras. There's like fractions in the someone that and someone that. No, we try to walk together, and that gives us a good groove. Like in Japan, we had to go through quarantine. Of course, there was hesitation, like, oh wow, we have to go to quarantine. It was a two-week project. We had 3 days in strict quarantine, and then the rest of 11 days in a tunnel quarantine, only hotel and concert hall. No tourism, no restaurants, no seeing friends, no nothing. And the musicians held their breath, and then they said, of course, we go. And we were rewarded with phenomenal reception, and so it's an investment, and it's the decision making comes together. It's not that Oливье forces the musicians, you have to go. If you like it or not, no whip. No, it comes from the collective that we understand the necessity of what needs to happen to be able to do the project. So this is where we are.
Great. You're fantastic.
We're very lucky. We're very lucky. We know that.
Me too. I hope to see you tomorrow. I'm sorry I have to go.
Have a good night. Thank you.
How do you manage your life? You conduct so many.
Oh God! Next question, please.
How do you manage to conduct so many concerts and to compose and to conduct ensemble and orchestras? I was 2 years ago in Berlin, and your programs in Berlin is very different from what you make this ensemble. How you compose? Do you have 1 week for composition or 1 month for composition? How do you manage?
Well, I mean, in my life pre-COVID, it turned out to be in the end like a little bit like I think what Gustav Mahler was living, that he kept a fair amount of the summer when, the festivals aside, but when the season was on pause, and I really tried to use those 2 months or something to compose. And that means I really sit down at 8 in the morning or 8:30 after my second espresso, and then I'm on. And then I work all day, and I do it every day. I just made a decision to write another opera, and that, yeah, me too. But I want to do it. I want to do it because I've done really well with my composing, and I need to be challenged and find something that is, of course, me, but that takes me into a different direction. And I decided to work with a librettist that represents a language that is very different from what I used to deal with. So I wanted the provocation. I wanted a new language to produce something inside me that is different. So this will have an impact on the conducting, because I will do a little less and be more specific about when I accept an invitation, and hopefully it makes more sense to be somewhere 3 weeks consecutive and then go home for 3 weeks, and not like constantly, jumping around, because it's very hard to get into the composing mode. It's not like a switch where you land from Japan and the next morning composing, that is not happening. So, and on the other hand, learning those scores, it takes time. I am working a lot, so I'm not lazy. And it's the same what I said earlier, half an hour ago, about the ensemble. I have no fear with the repertoire and with the new music. I have no fear. And luckily also I'm not nervous when I work with an orchestra. And even if I work with an orchestra for the first time, I'm not stressed about it. I know it's a gift that and it doesn't matter if it's a completely unknown orchestra or the Berliner Philharmoniker. It's the same thing for me. I just, good morning, and I'll start working. And that helps me a lot, because I'm not absorbed by anxiety of oh God, next week I'm going to this orchestra, and I'll just do it, and if it works, wonderful. If it doesn't work so well, that's also okay. It's just I'm kind of natural with doing things, and I'm not anxious sitting at home. And also the writing is whenever I decide something comes on the paper, after a long process of thinking, I trust it. And I leave it alone. And when I write a piece, I'm not going back and revise it. I've never done this for a long time. So if there's something that doesn't work as well as I wished it would, I still leave it as is and import that as a task for the next piece. Mm-hmm. So very different from what Pierre Boulez did, because there's certain works where he was always revisiting, revising, reshaping, extending, cutting something. So not to make it better, but it was a system of this organism that always kept changing and growing. For me, it's I say this and I leave it, and I can still, build a bridge from the end of the old one to the new one, but I leave it aside. And I think now, as I said, I'm 50 years old now, I think I want to be more challenged to live what Beethoven did, is to completely cut off something that you've done more or less successfully, to invent yourself new. If you look at the symphonies by Beethoven, 2 to 3, 3 to 4, 4 to 5, wow, this is completely, it's different worlds. Same with the string quartets, with the piano sonatas. There is, I think, no other composer in history that has so radically pushed everything away to get naked and jump into cold water and swim again. I mean, this is incredible, and I wish I would have more of that, but I'm working on it, and it keeps me fresh and inspired.
And if you work on your opera, do you work with librettist, or how you find your libretto? We
have been talking now for almost a year to define exactly what we wanted to do, and I won't share yet exactly what it is, but it's based on an old fairy tale, and we completely invented it and brought it to the 21st century. And we've been talking and talking and talking and spent days and days and days together, thinking and drinking and thinking and sleeping and starting again. And now he just wrote the first draft, so I see him in 1.5 weeks again in Berlin when I'm conducting, but I'm keeping all the non-conducting time free to work with him and to now define exactly the details. And he is he's Russian, by the way, Daniel Gerzenberg, Russian Jewish, but has a German passport too, who is a fantastic Liedbegleiter, accompanist, pianist. So he is a musician, and he works with wonderful singers, very famous singers, and it's incredible that I have a partner there that understands what music is, and not necessarily the case with lots of librettists that are just producing text. Text is a vessel for the music to maximize the text, and he knows this so well. So it's a very pleasurable experience to work with someone who knows sound and proportions and the role of text in something, in music theater and in opera. So it's a process, and he also has a lot of respect. I can instantly tell him, like, this word here and this comes too early. I need 10 more sentences here, and I need those images, and I need that sort of rhythm in between the two people, and he instantly can transform it and follow. Not that he does exactly what I want, but it's like it's really ping pong, yeah, and the ball is going back and forth, and I enjoy that process tremendously. Yeah, but I still make sure that I leave a lot of capacity of what he does that I have not designed. You know, he's not making a suit for me that fits me perfectly. I want it not to fit, yeah, so that I can explore and find something new inside myself. And we still keep that as a feature, that he's not designing something to please me. So we're still two identities.
Yeah. But initial idea came from you, an idea of the plot of your opera. It came from you, or?
Yes.
Yes.
The idea came from me, and I loved his poetry, and I've known him in different contexts, and I said, like, this is what I want to compose, and then we thought about it and understood that we couldn't reinvent this plot as it was in a fairy tale from the 18th century. So, and then we said, like, what do we want to say about specific incidents and phenomena of our time? Anxiety, abuse, and completely used the form and some of the characters and made it a piece in 2021. And I think it can be quite astonishing. It's also about, there's like the god Anubis, you know, that's being evoked at a certain point as a figure out of time, that's being just, you know, an evocation of something from the very ancient past. But we found documents of prayers and rituals from the Egyptian time of the god Anubis that, you know, on plaques, like almost as old as the Bible, and using those as, I mean, it's a collage of many things that are coming together. I feel good about it. No questions?
Okay, so I would like to say one important thing, and maybe then we have another question. In the beginning, you have asked me about this new music situation in Moscow, and I'm happy to say that for sure it changes, but very slowly. But the very important thing was ensemble intercontemporaries coming in November, because it changed a lot for the Moscow Philharmonic, which I represent, because even if we had only a 25% audience in the hall, it was so enthusiastic, and the same for the ensemble. As far as I could see, that it was obvious that in Moscow Philharmonic as well the situation should be changed. That's why in this season we are happy to have you here. We are waiting for Thomas Addes in spring and some more new subscription series with new music. So the situation changes slowly, but it does.
Good. That's good, because even, Don Giovanni was new music
Yes.
when it was written, and the people were not whistling the happy tunes of Don Giovanni on the street. So I think music needs to be heard, and we should forget about trying to educate people. There's a lot of educational measurements, like educational projects, and I would rename it as maybe seductive projects. I mean, who wants to be educated? Like, this is what you listen for, and like, this is how it goes, and thank you very much. Now you know. That's not sexy. It's like, why not just inviting people to explain that what we do is not different from a Schubert symphony. I don't understand a Schubert symphony. I maybe know something about it, or a lot, but every listener is equally qualified, I think. If you have heard Schubert's great symphony 3 times, or 100 times, or never, it makes you an equally qualified listener, because it tells you something about yourself. And this is the sad thing about music in general, is that we are kind of educated to only be able to appreciate it if we understand it. And when do you understand a piece of art? If you analyze it in the sonata form, first theme, second theme, and then in a different key signature, and so what? That doesn't make us understand it. It's no one tells us in the music of Anton Webern, for example, why it's so captivating when all of a sudden a flute plays so low that there's so much air in the sound, and that's why it makes it so physical, so strong. I mean, that's what we should talk about. And we have often small kids on stage. They sit on the floor in between us, and it brings me to tears to see how they listen to, like, they understand what feel is better. They feel what it means to play an instrument, that it only comes alive when air is going through it, or with a string instrument, you have 2 instruments, and how the sound is really changed. And this is a very important thing to seduce people to appreciate what this is, instead of telling them how they should feel. If you go to a museum, they tell them, like, look at this, and this is the intention of. How can we dare to say what the intention of an author is? We should feel something about this ourselves. And I think in the end, every great piece of art, and maybe that is one of the last statements, every great piece of art, like Leonardo da Vinci or the Goldberg variations, the greatest art allows us to enter the artwork. It's not raising the finger and tells us, this is how you should feel. This is the emotion that I'm trying to convey. They tell you something about yourself. Yeah, and because we're part of it. And I think that's so beautiful with great art, that it takes a step back to allow us to live in it, like the Goldberg variations.
Thanks you for your concert in St. Petersburg 2 years ago, and in November in Moscow. It was fantastic, and thanks a lot. And can you give some recommendations for young conductors, maybe? Your recommendations from your experience, from your experience.
I think things are changing very, very much nowadays for so many reasons. There is finally diversity being very actively happening. So we have finally a lot of female composers. And what is even more important is to encourage people from different backgrounds and, the girls to, oh yes, I can be a successful conductor, and because now we have them. But it took time. There's no switch. You can't produce everything that you want to really fill this image of diversity in 2 years. It takes 5, 6, 7, 8 years, because now is the moment when you see, oh, there is a female conductor that has a great impact, so maybe I want to study conducting, or I want to study music. So conducting means listening. Conducting is not waving your hands. And it's mostly misunderstood that if you wave your hands and if you have great hair and look good and something, you're a conductor. And that is not untrue, but it's also not true. Because the role of the conductor is not to illustrate the music, but to have insight and make the score speak, and not yourself, because you like it that way. So we have to be very careful that this métier is not changing to just showing the music, but to still learn and spend a lifetime with it, and fail. Becoming a conductor means failing over and over and over again. And hopefully it's not so tough that you will fall out of the picture, but that you can do it again. But you always add, and you add competence by having insight in the score. And it doesn't matter what you look like if you get the sound. And this is the fantastic thing. I mean, we know about conductors today or in the past that look not even elegant, but they get the sound because they have a way how to inspire the orchestra to do justice to the score. Not because it's this conductor or that conductor, because the score all of a sudden speaks. And that is the task of the conductor. And it comes with practical experience. I mean, it's this triangle of knowledge, inspiration, and craft. But they all have to develop at the same time. You cannot only do it with knowledge or only with talent. So it comes from several angles. But luckily, there's still so many orchestras, and there's more and more ensembles, and there is such a rich musical scene in this world, and so many new smaller orchestras are being founded constantly. There is a lot of opportunity, yes, and even now coming out of COVID, I think there's a lot of opportunity, and but allow yourself time. I mean, I think the conducting takes even more time than the composing or learning an instrument. And it never gets easier. The more you know, the better you do it, the harder it gets, which is not very encouraging, but that's just the truth.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Tatiana. I'm a musicologist and I'm a musical critic, and I write a dissertation about music Georges Apergis. Maybe do you know him?
Sorry?
Georges Apergis.
Yeah.
And I'm part of Team Stravinsky Online. It's a musical journal about new music, and here's my colleague too. And I want to say thanks about the concert. When you was here in November, I had COVID, and I just have a translation, and it was wonderful. And when I see at home, it was so many emotions, and I think here it's could be more. Yes, and I want to say about this hall. There's many composers, different type of thinkings, type of composing, and it's so interesting to see here. And I waiting tomorrow, and I want to see to hear your piece, and if I, может быть, я спрошу по-русски, это боюсь уточнить. Название есть название песни. Правильно ли я это поняла, и как это может быть связано с произведением?
Если вы откроете наш новый номер альманаха, там это объяснено. Да, в интервью, которое Маттиас дал нам заранее.
Хорошо. И у меня есть еще один вопрос.
There was
I
a
had
question about the
another.
bridge over troubled water, but the answer is still here.
Okay, I will read it.
I can say it in 2 sentences. It's very easy.
Okay, yes.
I mean, I received this phone call, well, 3 sentences, from the friends in Berlin, and I said, we have this virtual festival, and we're asking, I don't know, 6 composers, I think, or 7.
10, I believe.
10, he knows everything. 10 composers, and would you like to write something? And I said, absolutely, because it was also my friend Emmanuel Pahu, who is such a great flutist. And then that night, and I told Daniel Barnbaum, like I always wanted to write for the trio of the viola and harp and flute. And that night, a friend had the blues, a friend from Boston, and he said, do you know Bridge Over Troubled Waters by Paul Simon? I said, no. And I listened to it, and we were completely isolated in New York. It was in May when the city was completely shut down and there were no cars on the big avenues. Everything was closed. New York had shut down. And when I took the dog out, on 6th Avenue, there was no car, no people. That was the time. And then this evening I heard the Paul Simon song, and I burst out. It was a tough time. I was crying like so hard. And then at the same time, the first line Paul Simon sings, it comes in this kind of high chest voice, and it sounded like a viola. And I'm like, wow, and what a great title, A Bridge Over Dark Waters. And the dark waters were gushing underneath us, basically, with the virus. And so like my inspiration was exploding, and for this dark sonority of water flowing, eternity, because water is eternal. And we will die and we go, but the water will always, it will not stop, it will go. And that was helping me somewhat, and I was emotional about the song. And the title made sense, and instantly all the sonorities for these 3 instruments came together. It's a dark piece, not sad, it's dark, and it's my COVID piece, or one of 2 COVID pieces, and it came out very naturally and quickly. And sometimes as a composer you have this where you just, it takes you, you're not pushing, you're just following. And this is the greatest thing that can happen to a composer, if something takes you by the hand and walks you through the piece that you actually invent, but you feel like you're not doing it, you're just following. And that was one of the beautiful experiences I had in this absolutely terrifying time when people were in New York, people were dying like flies. And it was also the day of that phone call was like when we had this like military, I don't know if you've seen it on TV, it was this tank ship, which was a substitute hospital because on the water, because all the hospitals were completely beyond capacity, and they brought this like military tank hospital just to host people to die. And we saw, it was on the news, this huge, it was apocalyptic, like a zombie movie. There came this like black dark ship and was docking actually right where we live in Chelsea. And that, I mean, just thinking back of it just gives me chills. So that was that time, and the piece came out of this, and this beautiful Paul Simon, very simple song actually, but so there's no quotation of any material, it's just the title has helped me to evoke and imagine the sonority of the piece.
Thank you. It could be very interesting, I think. Maybe you can say what could be like inspiration for you, like a composer. You just said stories about this piece, but what it could be more in other pieces.
It's always different. I mean, it's also like interpreters can inspire you, or like an orchestra that you know for so long always inspires you because you know them. And for me, in my 20s, I was very, very much oriented with literature, and especially with French literature. And I wrote operas with French text, and then in my 30s and 40s, I was very much also inspired by visual arts, contemporary art in particular. And so a lot of inspiration comes from those sources. But sometimes it's just a player, that says, I would like to commission you a piece. Would you like to? And then, by the inspiration of the person that you're writing for, comes out a piece. It's always different. There's no concept really for what inspiration is, and if we would also know how we can influence and trigger our inspiration, I think that would be dangerous, because then it's not natural anymore. You want to respond to your condition on that very day, yeah? I think that's also something that we all need to learn nowadays, is to listen again. Because I think COVID, what it has done to us is we all had to stay at home, we all couldn't be with the people that we love and like, and we were all at home on your computers and everything, all the blogging and everything was internet and craze, and so many people in their anonymity were saying things or attacking other things or being aggressive, and I think now this has to stop that, because now we can see each other again, and we have to learn again to listen. Yeah, it's like in the past there were all these great rituals that we have, like you invite someone over for dinner and you make the table nice, you buy a nice bottle of wine, and the person that is invited brings maybe some flowers or brings a bottle. These were all rituals that we don't talk about anymore, because it was a basis of how society used to operate. And now this is all gone, because we didn't have the real action with real people anymore. So there's so much talking about what you have to do, what you can't do, what you shouldn't do, what you've done wrong, what you should do better. And I hope that we come out of this to really appreciate togetherness again, and stop talking all the time and just listen more. And obviously we are very lucky with the art form that we live with, the music, that it's beyond the language. And sometimes to be quiet and just generate sound with the musicians without the talking is a blessing. So, but this is how I feel. It's a very personal approach.
Thank you. And the last question, it's about national component in music. When you conducting or maybe listening, do you feel different between music of different country, maybe German music, French music, and other countries?
I don't know. I have to be totally honest. It's the thing that we, as an interpreter, conductor is an interpreter, a cellist is an interpreter. Like we all interpret. That you think you're good at something more, this than that, but it's actually not true. Sometimes you can be completely wrong, and then all of a sudden, because of the other one or other reason, someone says, "Oh, now you conduct the Moldau by Smetana," and I'm like, "Oh, yeah, I love the piece, but would never have thought about it." And all of a sudden, it becomes you, and you. I've just conducted a huge production of Lohengrin in the winter, and it was my first Wagner opera that I conducted, and I had no idea that it did that to me. And now I'm going to be conducting a lot of Wagner. It was obviously so convincing that now not all, but many major opera companies have reached out and inquired if I wanted to conduct Wagner. And I felt very much at home, completely unexpected. And sometimes you conduct other repertoire over and over again because you think that's what you have, but maybe it's not 100% yours. So there is no, I don't know. I mean, but you are right. I think, especially in the repertoire, there is certain styles of, and Italian music has been different from the music of Mendelssohn in Leipzig, and it clearly does exist. But now I think with the internet and everything is so accessible to young students or the younger generation of artists, it's all fluid and flowing. So there is no more such thing as the Italian school or the Spanish school or the Russian school. It's all fluid, and I think it's a great thing. I think it's a great thing that we have access to everything, which doesn't make making choices easier, because now the young people have everything in front of them. So like, where do you start? But it's like, a good chef needs to be able to cook French and Thai and make a good omelette and everything. You don't need to like omelette, but if you can't make a good omelette, you are not a chef. even if you decide to do sushi or Chinese cuisine or something. So there is basic requirements. And I think this is good that we are all tasting these different influences, let's call it, not styles, influences, and then try to merge out of it and make it our own thing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We have a very intense musical life in Moscow with the modern music. I mean, just to add some things to the things that was said tonight. As Tatiana said, she with the colleagues, they make a big website, big musical journal about new music. And other things they do, Gnesin Lab, a big laboratory for the musicians, conductors, performers, composers. Yes. And this is a really big initiative, creative initiative. And 10 years when I finished the Moscow Conservatory, here in Moscow maybe one concert, really interesting concert of modern music. But now, someday we have 3 or 4 really interesting events with the modern music in the theater or something like this, and you just couldn't decide which place you should go tonight.
Because there was so much more.
Yes.
Yeah.
And even every year a new ensemble of new music appears in Moscow. And I really am glad to say that I know all these composers who are here today somehow have a chance to realize their initiatives. So we really have very, very intense life of modern music here.
I'm very, very glad to hear, and hopefully next time I will know more and we'll have a table ronde, and share a meal or a nice glass of wine and get to know each other. And please, I would also really love to encourage all, not only the young, any Russian composers that we don't, I'm saying we, the ensemble and me, don't know yet, to send us music. So next time I know the personalities and we can have really discussion, because I'm very interested. And shame over us, we haven't really explored the Russian scene to the extent we should have yet. And I would love to change that. Sadly now COVID doesn't prevent us to really explore together, but I'm hoping that there is a next time.
Yeah, you have to promise to come back.
Well, if it's an invitation, we'll say yes.
It is.
Well, then next time, how's that?
Maybe next time we could have some kind of, not masterclass, but meeting with the instrument, with the piano, with the score, something like this.
Yeah.
Absolutely. We should do a workshop, or maybe workshop some of your pieces and read them and discuss them, because that makes a connection. It's not only to be programmed in a prestigious context, it's like to get to know each other. And so maybe we can work on that.
Yeah, we hope so.
Deal.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for this meeting.
Thank you very much for coming also.